Yeah. I gotta take some.
This little thing.
I do. I got an extra coat under here.
Brand new thing.
Good.
Oh, Leah.
Not to mention
Oh, no,
that I'm
it's
parked at the
Katie.
football field.
So Terry,
and I had to walk across the soccer field to get here.
I've been here, I've signed everything.
I thought about it, and I was like,
Oh, all right.
my card.
Yeah.
Are you reviewing?
Oh, okay. All right. I'm like, doesn't take much.
If you want anything, all righty.
Okay, I call this meeting of the Monomoy Regional School Committee to order at 6:33. And before we start the official agenda, for the business of on the agenda, I want to take a minute to welcome Tina Gaines into the Monomoy School Committee. Personally, I look forward to working with you with your fresh ideas related to advocacy and community engagement. And with that said, I was also inspired that 4 Harwich residents or candidates came forward to replace the seat that was left vacant. Anyway, so welcome aboard, Tina.
Thank you very much. Glad to be
I see you brought your fans. Oh, never mind. All right. So back to the agenda. And the first order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes. Are there any corrections? Okay, with that, I'll take a motion.
I move to approve the minutes.
I would second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment, 5 minutes. Okay.
Please identify.
Oh, yeah. All right, if there are, oh, sorry. Charles, come up.
Charles Gruska, 6 Teabury Ave, Harwich. I want to make some public comments, perhaps the first comments from the public on budget deliberations, and hope that many, many people will follow me from the public to give their input to the school committee and sharing their thoughts as community members. The comments that I'll make are based on the superintendent's comments at the December 13th school committee meeting. So if anything has drastically changed from that and everything's going to be smooth sailing this year, then file whatever I have to say and file it for future reference, because it's based on an assumption that the perfect storm is brewing and it could be rough sailing this year. After about 30 consecutive years of contentious school budget seasons, which in the areas where I worked and lived, when I moved here, I was pleasantly surprised that over the last 2 budget seasons, budgets supported by the school committee and which were amazingly adequate to me, best budgets I've ever seen in decades, as I said the other night, were sailed through the town meeting with no difficulty. I'm speaking tonight as a private resident, a taxpayer, a retired senior on a relatively fixed income. No children in the system or coming into the system in the future, but I do have 2 grandchildren attending the Monomoy schools under school choice, one at the high school and one at the middle school. First, I'd like to ask the school committee to, throughout the process, to insist on the superintendent that he present a budget which fully meets the needs of the district and any objectives laid out in the 2018-2002 district strategic plan, which I had a great privilege to work on with the administrators, teachers, community members, school committee members of the district. Second, to insist that the superintendent report any unmet needs and/or important items from the district wish list that are not included in any budget iteration during the process up until the final school committee approval. So that there's a clear picture of, even with the budget that's going to be proposed, is there anything else that really would add additional quality to our quality district? And third, insist that the superintendent calculate what budget increase percentage what the increase in budget percentage would be if health insurance costs were factored out, to put the school budget on a par with other town department budgets for comparative purposes. That was done last year. I thought it was a wonderful thing to do. Never before had considered the fact that other department budgets have the health insurance factor weighed out into another general line item, so it doesn't affect their particular department's budget increase. And then I want to urge a few things of the school committee. I want to urge the committee to approve a budget which fully meets the needs of the district and allow the voters of the town an opportunity to vote on that budget at the town meeting. If the budget's out of line with expectations of the selectmen and our finance committee, to have the superintendent recommend reductions that would be necessary to comply with the desire of town boards, so that there'd be a clear picture of what the budget that the town boards would like to see would look like for the school department, and what differences that would make from what is really adequate for the education of our children. Third, to set in place a plan for educating the parent community of the district through the superintendent and principals working with the school councils and PTOs on the direct specific impact on each school to bring the budget in line with the desire of town boards, and educate parent community on the process by which the school budget is passed and the critical need for their presence at the town meeting where each one of them gets to vote on the budget. My experience is that people with advanced degrees did not learn the process in school about how a school budget passes through in town meeting government. I didn't know that process until I was a school administrator, or formerly president of a teachers union, and had to attend meetings and carry a budget, follow a budget through the town meeting process. People are very, very busy with their lives. They don't have a chance or time, because they're dealing with their families, to get all involved in this whole process. But they don't really, I assure you that a vast majority of people never learned it and don't know the process. And then they come in September and they say, why do we not have this? What happened there? And I used to say, were you at town meeting? Because that's where those decisions were made, and you had an equal vote of anyone else in town, including your vote counted the same as every selectman, your vote counted the same as every finance committee member, every school committee member. It's absolutely critical for people to come to the town meeting when the school budget is being voted on, and to vote their conscience on the budget. And I would strongly suggest to the school committee, urge the school committee to set in place a plan to provide child care for children of parents who wish to attend town meeting. So single parents can attend, and two-parent families can be represented with 2 votes at the town meeting.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to anybody about these ideas prior to the meeting. There's a question that floats out there. The question was raised Monday night in the interviews to fill the vacant school committee slot. It's a very important question, and that was the question: what about the large percentage of resident taxpayers who do not have children in the system, and like me, are on fixed incomes and are impacted by the decisions regarding the school budget? I'm still kicking myself because I didn't really answer that question the way I've answered it in the past before forums, public forums, advocating for budgets. I want to answer that now. I was in that situation that was described Monday night for 9 years in Worcester after I retired from the district that I was working in. What I always answered was, the most important work in the community is taking place in the homes and schools of the community, because that's where the future is being molded. The outcome of those venues results in the future leaders, future decision makers, and future caregivers of our community. And I always like to remind myself that because we've done such a good job in the educational system and advanced our knowledge and skills so far, we now, just about everyone in this room, could count on the fact that you're going to live long enough to once again become totally dependent upon someone else to take care of you. We're going to need someone to shower you. We're going to need someone to dress you. We're going to need someone to change our diapers. Those people, those leaders, those decision makers who determine what kind of care we get at this later stage in life, and I've been there with a mother and a mother-in-law. I've done those things. Those people are being trained in our schools. Those people were trained in our schools. And that's why, even though I don't have children in the system, I see the work that goes on is so important. And the second answer I give is that I don't pay for anything that doesn't work or doesn't work well enough. I pay for quality that does its job. And so when we have a school system that doesn't work and can't work because it doesn't have the resources for the good people in the system to do their work, then I feel that all of my taxpayer dollars, which are quite a few, going to the school system are wasted because they're all going to a system that doesn't work. So it's just a waste of money. My wife and I paid tuition for our older daughter from grade 2 to 12 and for our younger daughter from grade K to 12 on top of our property taxes because the community where I live, we could not trust the ability of the school system to adequately meet their needs. And I wish I could have had all those taxpayer dollars, property tax dollars back, that because my children didn't go to the public schools to pay for the schools they went. There was no school choice. There was no charter schools in those days. So that's just food for thought for you, perhaps, when you're going to be asked that question many times between now and town meeting. And the final thing I say is everyone's got to continue. I urge the school committee to join with the Massachusetts Superintendents Associations, your school committee organizations, your teacher organizations to lobby our legislators, to lobby Representative Peake, to lobby Senator Sear, and critical on changing and correcting the foundation budget. I testified before the Joint Legislative Committee when they were discussing whether to start a review commission, which they did. The commission sent out its reports. They haven't been followed up on. Just this week, however, there's been new legislation filed, both from Senator Chang Diaz, I believe, and the governor has also talked about filing his own education bill. We've got to the community's got to get behind that, because the foundation budget is $2.1 billion inadequate, and there's 1,000 and more, multi-thousand, perhaps millions of dollars that could be due back to Harwich if the foundation budget was incorrect and was up to date and was working the way it's supposed to work. And that would mean more money from the state rather than the local taxpayers' property taxes to fund and continue funding the outstanding educational program. You've heard me speak before about how bullish I am on the Monomoy district based on my 34 years as an educator, 24 as a principal. My experiences here working on a lot of projects, being in the schools a lot on a voluntary basis. And so as one senior citizen, fixed income, no children in the system, I urge the school committee to make sure the superintendent comes forth with a totally adequate budget, and I urge you to let that budget go through to the town meeting and then sell that budget as best you can so that the community in a thoughtful way can vote to continue to support the quality that's being derived here in the Monomoy district. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Then I'll close that section of the agenda and move on to recognitions. You.
So I have a few. First, in collaboration with the town of Harwich, Harwich Elementary School has submitted an application for $586,000 in sidewalk and intersection improvements through the Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Grant Program. The school will find out later this month how the grant is proceeding, what the next steps are. I'd also like to applaud the Harwich Elementary community for their first annual Polar Plunge, which enticed over 100 supporters into the icy waters. This was to support the Harwich Elementary School and Cape Cod Wellness Collaborative. The plungers donated over $1,300 to support both organizations. And lastly, on a more somber note, I just want to sort of recognize and acknowledge the passing of a former Monomoy Regional School Committee member. Glenn Bryant Sr. Was one of the school committee members when I first came here, and I oftentimes say when you're superintendent and you go to first interview, an interview is a two-way street. So you've got 8 bosses that you're seeing for the first time and getting to know. And Glenn was one of those reasons why I wanted to come here. He was an educator who had great vision about what he wanted to see in this budding school district. Glenn had been a 6th grade English teacher and a guidance counselor at Harwich High School for 36 years. He spent 27 years as a golf coach for Harwich High and was on school committee here for only 1 year. And the only reason that Glenn left the school committee is that in his first year, his family he actually decided to move closer to his children in Harwich. And he lived in Chatham, moved to Harwich, and because he was no longer a Chatham resident, he had to leave the school committee, and we were all hoping that a time would come when there'd be a Harwich vacancy and see Glenn once again on the school committee. There will be a celebration of Glenn's life tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the First Congregational Church in Chatham, and I extend my deepest sympathies to Glenn's family.
Okay. At this time, before moving on to the reports and discussions, I'd like to, if there's no objection, appoint Tina Games to some of the subcommittees on our list. Finance, the Policy Committee, and Sick Bank. There are no objections. I'd like to go with that appointment. So moved. Okay. Okay, on to reports and discussion. Senior class trip.
Before we get started, we have some itineraries to pass out to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for allowing us to speak in front of you tonight on behalf of the entire senior class. We hope you had a happy holiday and beginning of the new year. My name is Abby Higgins, and I'm the secretary of the class of 2019. With me tonight is Cam Archibald, the president, Jason Maciel, the vice president, and Danny Origas, the treasurer. Tonight we plan on presenting our senior class trip. As you may have already heard, the senior class was given 4 destination options, which were thoroughly explained and presented to them, and were asked to vote on their top 2 destination options in order. Montreal, Canada won with about 80% of the first choice votes. We will be reviewing the itinerary with you now, along with a slideshow of photos.
All right, so Montreal, it'll take approximately 7 hours and 30 minutes to drive there. So Saturday, it's going to be a 4:30 arrival with a 5 a.m. departure. And this is the Montreal Science Center in IMAX. And then this is Old Montreal. And then before this, it's going to be a dinner at a French restaurant. Then following shopping in Old Montreal, it's going to be a Montreal ghost tour. So it's a guided historical tour that takes place at night. Visit the city's notoriously spooky sites while learning more about the history of the city. And then Sunday, it's going to be start off with the breakfast. And then afterwards, go to Montreal Tower. It's the tallest inclined tower in the world, 45-degree incline, and the Leaning Tower of Pisa is only actually 5 degrees. And then we're going on a tour of the Olympic stadiums. And then the Notre Dame Basilica of Montreal, it's a cathedral. And then a possible dinner cruise, if it's available on that day. Then on Monday, we go to Six Flags La Ronde. And that's it.
Listed along with the itinerary is a list of what the package includes. So we could cover that with you guys. The package includes deluxe motor coach transportation, DVD and bathroom, 2 nights lodging with an indoor pool, 2 breakfasts, 1 dinner, and the possible dinner dance cruise. All of the admission listed in the itinerary is included with the cost of the trip, along with all taxes and gratuities. And there will be 2 coordinators, tour coordinators for 2 days, 1 per bus. We would also like to emphasize that although it is not listed on the sheet, private hotel security is included in this package.
As you can see, the prices on the sheet are given in a range. The more people that sign up for the trip, the less the cost will be per student. We hope to be able to donate about $80 per person to alleviate the cost of the trip, and we will continue to fundraise to do so. Per school policy, the luggage and bags of each student will be checked prior to departure. Our plan is to have the students bring in their luggage officially the day before in order for our class advisors, Mrs. Casey and Dr. Otto, to check thoroughly.
As far as the planning goes, if the trip is approved, the first step would be to set up a payment plan immediately so students can plan financially. There'll probably be an initial down payment and then 1 to 2 separate payments as we get closer. We're also requiring all students to submit all the necessary paperwork to cross the border into Canada 1 month prior so that we can make copies of it, and just in case anyone forgets it the day of. And for people who don't know, if you're under 18 on a school trip, a passport isn't required to go into Canada. You just need a birth certificate, but if you're 18 or older, you need a passport. And during our original presentation, we did emphasize the fact that a passport is an extra cost, and it's on the students to get a passport on their own, but they didn't deter them for voting for Montreal. Thank you for your time. We can take any questions too, if you guys have any.
Did you say that Dr. Otto and Betsy Casey are the chaperones on this?
There's some of the chaperones. There'll be more chaperones. We get, I believe it's 1 free chaperone for every 10 people that sign up. So the more people that sign up, the more chaperones they'll have. They're definitely going to be on the trip, but we haven't picked any other chaperones yet.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie?
Just a question, just out of curiosity actually, the boat cruise, do you guys have an option if that doesn't work out, what you're looking to do or backup plan?
We don't yet, but the tour guide that we've been working with, he's been very flexible, so I'm sure we can find something.
Terry?
Good job, guys. My question is regarding the $80 gift towards classmates who might not afford, be able to afford it. Just to add, see if I can keep my thoughts straight. I'd like to know at the end of the process before you leave, I wouldn't want any kid, because 80 is still far short from 600 or whatever, who really wanted to go to the senior trip but just falls terribly short. And my feeling, I don't know where we come up with the money, but whether or not you're fundraising, but I wouldn't want a boy or girl not to go on a senior trip because they couldn't afford it.
So the $80 is just the money that we've raised so far, so we have money in our account left over from our prom last year. And then from now on, we're gonna fundraise money where whoever wants to get money, because we've had a little bit of a drop in participation in our fundraisers, whoever wants to get money can come to the fundraisers and they'll split that money. And if some student cannot afford it, then we will work with them to make sure that they can go. Great. We'll figure something out. Yep.
Just one little sensitivity to keep in mind. I'll preface this by first, I love the idea of going to Montreal. I think it'd be a great trip. I've also had the unfortunate challenge one time when I was taking a group trying to get to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and we were going to go through Canada as a shortcut, and suddenly realized that one of the folks on our trip, on our tour bus, was sort of in between sort of immigration status, and had we left the country with them, they potentially might not be able to get in. And I think we have to just keep in mind, and I think it might be some outreach that that folks would need to do as to, because you don't want to exclude anybody, and immigration challenges are much more awkward these days than 20 years ago when I was trying to get across Canada as a shortcut.
That's something that we can look into for sure.
And I just want to echo that because that was a concern, so thank you for saying that. I just also want to make sure that we're not leaving anybody out, and if they need support around preparing for the passport, I know you said it's kind of on them. I just want to make sure that if they don't have that support at home, I just would like to know that somebody is available to help them.
We will all be available to help people throughout the process, and again, alleviate any of the financial needs. If needed, we're always available. We can help them set up. We can go help them get a passport if needed to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I was going to ask for a motion on this, but I'm wondering, as I'm thinking this through, if there's some unanswered questions about the passport, about trusting that the tour director is going to come up with a substitute plan. And I'm just thinking, do we need that identified before we take a vote? Is there any response to that, or you just assume that it's going to be okay?
I would suggest that we have a vote this evening, and if the leaders up here find themselves with a problem, they can respond to your class advisor and get back to us.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to vote on this senior trip to Montreal.
I move to approve the Monomoy Regional High School Montreal, Canada trip starting on Saturday, May 25th, 2019.
I'd second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Richardson.
Okay.
Ms. Richardson.
Oh.
I just wanted to say that this is the first time since I've been on, and I've been on the school committee, all of Monomoy, that we've had students present this, and I liked it. I thought the students did a great job.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Cape Cod Collaborative Transportation Update. Buses must have arrived.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Compared to
I mean, I've been before. I'm saying I want to go on that trip. Yeah, with that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they do and then we had a group still going to Beijing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they did Beijing.
That was, I know, gosh, what was that?
We just signed something up because we passed it.
Yeah.
We don't really.
You can start talking.
I can start talking. I thought maybe Dr. Carpenter would introduce.
Oh, no. Thank you.
Then my daughter's going to Tanzania.
We need 4 buses for Canada, somehow if you can squeeze that in, it's a deal, you know?
So, the last time we met, we had talked about having no bidders for our transportation contract, that we would start to engage in conversations with Cape Cod Collaborative to look towards them providing bus transportation. Cape Cod Collaborative has gotten into transportation, providing transportation for other districts. Katie and I met with Paul Funk, the business manager for Mashpee, which is on the, at least on Cape Cod, the district that has been most involved with the collaborative for transportation, or for the most number of years. And Paul speaks very highly, Paul Funk that is, speaks very highly of the services that they have gotten from the collaborative and how the collaborative has helped them stabilize their transportation budget as a district. But the collaborative is in many ways an unknown when it comes to transportation for this group, so I wanted Paul to come and do a little presentation for you. I also want it to be sensitive to the fact that with the exception of maybe even 3 or 4 people on our board, many of you might not know what the collaborative is or what they do. So I asked Paul to sort of on the front end of his presentation to sort of educate the committee a little bit about the collaborative itself. Ultimately, in terms of time sensitivity, if we do decide to go with the collaborative, and this body is going to need to make that decision by our next meeting, because we have to ultimately work with the collaborative to order buses, and otherwise we would not have buses in time for September of next year. So there's some time sensitivity to this, but also I think there's a lot of educating that needs to happen before a thoughtful vote can be made.
Great.
All yours, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. Thank you to the chair of the school committee and members of the school committee. It's really nice to be here in the beautiful building and the most well-attended school committee meeting I think I've been to.
You're welcome.
Glad we could do that for you.
Mr. Russell has served on our board, but I don't think we've had the pleasure of having anybody else on the committee join our board.
I'd like to nominate Ms. Gaines. No.
We're ready to orient her today. I gave quite a packet of information. Our goal is to work closely with the district to support any needs that they have, but where you're looking to start services July 1st and for school in late August, early September of this year, we need to make sure that there are vehicles and drivers and that everything is in order. And it seems like a long way away, but for us, it's yesterday that we needed to make these decisions. A little bit of history about the collaborative in our services. We're going to go through quickly, and I'm not going to read this because you all have the packet if somebody doesn't. Ms. Lipkind is here, and she'll be happy with Mr. Dupuy to give copies. I'm Paul Hilton. I'm the director of the collaborative. Amy Lipkind is our business manager, and Mark Dupuy has been working with us for the past year and a half, 2 years, who's a former superintendent and has developed a strong affinity for working with the needs of districts. And the collaborative is much like an elephant to a visually impaired person, where it's people perceive it differently depending on where they sit. So the collaborative was established many years ago in 1975. Primarily, the students, young individuals were deinstitutionalized and they needed to support children in public schools. And with the low incidence populations, school districts weren't able to respond. And they passed enabling legislation in 1975, and school districts decided that they could work together to provide better for students than they could individually. Since that time, collaboratives have evolved significantly, and locally we have something called the Articles of Agreement, which is the constitution for the collaborative. And as I'm fond of saying, you own the collaborative, we're you, there is no difference. We are not a company, we're not a vendor, we're not a nonprofit. We are part of each of the school districts, and you have a say in what we do, and you own us along with the other 18 school committees on Cape Cod. This is a little bit of our enabling legislation, and every school committee is entitled to have a vote on the school committee, and some collaboratives, educational collaboratives, the superintendent is the voting member. In other collaboratives, the school committee members, the school committees appoint a member that is the voting member of the board of directors. Mr. Russell had sat with us for a period of time. You've had several others. At one point in time, the Monomoy Public Schools had 2 votes when they were 2 separate districts, but as they consolidated, they have 1 vote. In terms of what the collaborative does, I said the collaborative is a little bit different to everybody that comes in contact with the collaborative, depending on what the needs are. Cape Cod in 2019 is much different than Cape Cod in 1975 and the years in between. There's been significant expansion and contraction in what the collaborative has done. I started the collaborative 10 years ago. It's very different now, and services are very different than they were 10 years ago, and very different each year before that. In terms of the programming we do, this is a list of what we do, and as you'll see, there's just about nothing that we won't do if the districts need it. You'll see along with this, the third from the bottom, we also provide transportation services. If it's a need of districts, there were 3 other collaboratives in the state that are significantly involved in transportation, and that has amplified significantly over the past 7 or 8 years. The advantages of a collaborative, better educational opportunities, increased effectiveness. As some of your audience members are wearing, it's kind of stronger when you're together. The more you do together, the stronger your programming can be. And you have an opportunity to be very lean in your operation and very efficient, and you're sharing the overhead costs. Monomoy, as I said, was a founding member, has consistently participated, and has been integral in terms of the development of programming for the collaborative in the past, and I'm sure they will be in the future. In terms of what Monomoy does, for those of you that haven't been familiar, we run special ed programs. There's been 6 and over, sometimes fewer students that participate in our special education programming. We run a program at Mass Maritime. There's been anywhere between 11 and 18 students that participate in our 3-week residential program. We do grants through the collaborative that districts benefit differently from. We have an all Cape In service. This past year was smaller than it's been. It's gone anywhere from 180 participants among all the 19 districts to well over 950 participants. And every month we have regional professional meetings where people share ideas and develop opportunities for collaboration, either through the collaborative or independently for special ed directors, curriculum directors, business managers, and facility directors. And the superintendents also get together once a month to tell me what I should be doing for them. Special education transportation, Monomoy has participated in. We have provided therapy services on a contracted basis, and virtual high school is a service we've offered that some districts have engaged and some have otherwise engaged in the past. I'm not going to read particularly through. ASLP, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the 3-week program at Mass Maritime. Currently, Monomoy is participating in a grant which we refer to as Promoting Achievement for All Students, which is somewhat a continuation of a previous grant, which is significantly funded professional support from many staff, professional and administrative staff within school districts. And we are now 10 days into this grant, so I can't provide much more detail, but we certainly will as we move forward. In terms of our experience, we're here about transportation. We have had significant experience, and it's not brand new. Before 1997, the collaborative helped Monomoy, helped Martha's Vineyard, too many M's, develop their transportation services, but since that time we've been providing large bus transportation or general education transportation to Nantucket, thereafter Truro, Mashpee, Bourne, and this past year Nauset. We've been specializing in special ed transportation for various districts, and we've done a lot of consultation. For those of you that may have been around 10 years ago, we worked with Chatham, and they asked us to consider taking over their transportation a few years before they regionalized. We did not think it was opportune Just because we work with the district regarding assessing their needs doesn't mean it's always the right choice. In terms of your transportation, you have some challenges. I think among the challenges are you've gone out to bid twice in the past year and you had nobody respond. The collaborative won't respond. What we will do is help analyze the prices that you receive because we're part of your district, we're part of each of the districts on the Cape, and we're kind of like the coach in the corner that can give you an analysis of what's happening. The difficulty in your situation is that nobody bid, but you have a large geographical area. Cape Cod is a line. You're not towns that are squished together. 2 elementary schools that are not co-located, a regional middle and high school that aren't co-located. You don't own assets. By that, you don't have your own buses. Nobody's coming in to run a fleet. And the labor supply on Cape Cod, you don't have a line of people that are wanting to drive vehicles. So there are some challenges. Limited competition on Cape Cod, cost transparency. It's very difficult to understand how a bus runs and what the costs are associated. Everybody has a car, runs a car. It's not quite the same as running a car. The average cost for a large bus to run per year is over $60,000. And that's a lot of money. I don't think anybody is spending $60,000 a year on your car. And the lack of flexibility in service changes. Your population is changing every year. Where your students are coming from for home is changing. Your schedules for school may change. Your activities may change. That's very difficult to plan. When you own the vehicles, when you own the labor, it's a little bit easier to move pieces around. Part of the solutions and the opportunities are working on understanding what drives the cost, how you can work with the routes, what it looks like when you own the vehicles. Because you own the collaborative, if you're running your transportation through the collaborative, once those vehicles are fully paid for, we don't get an increased profit, you get a decreased price. And I think that's one of the benefits Dr. Carpenter and Ms. Isernio found as they spoke with some of the other districts. The cost stability goes down as the vehicles are owned. The control of your supply and your demand, you only use what you need and you only pay for what you're using. Field trip cost control, the vehicles are used during the day. You're paying for the vehicles during the cost of your daily schedules. And when you run a field trip, you're just paying for the drivers and for the maintenance and the cost of the fuel for the vehicle. And then you do have the capacity to change your service as the need for your service changes. We are experiencing in some districts the need to drop buses. If you have 14 routes plus an express route. In Monomoy, currently, if you drop 2 buses, there's not a penalty. It's working together to find out what to do with 2 buses. If you add 2 buses, we need to find a way to add 2 buses. It's not it's engaging in what the profit and loss is. With labor, procurement of the vehicles, we're trying to work with the district to solve each of these challenges. It's not a challenge where we're trying to bring in the lowest cost labor and increase our profit. Field trips and athletic cost control, when you're paying for just the cost of what the labor and the fuel is, you're able to do more things that you decide to do. The other benefit we've seen with districts is the municipal use of the vehicles through the school committee in the summer. If you have municipal camps or summer camps with the schools, they're getting a very very cost-beneficial opportunity to run increased numbers of trips if it's approved through the school committee. Other ways of meeting the challenges, I'm not going to read through them as I have read through what I said I wouldn't, but retirees to the area, working with parents who have children in school. Opportunities for routing, working very closely with the administrators in the school in terms of the confidentiality of students, the placement of students. The more you can work together and understand where students are and where they're going, the more efficient you can be in your routing. Where we don't have a profit incentive, our goal is to make sure you're not procuring or using any more vehicles or labor than you need to. So we have no incentive to do anything except provide the service that you're requiring. Opportunities for local control quality. We want to make sure that you're having dispatch and driver support locally. We've done that differently in different districts, but working very closely. Local customer service, making sure that we have people that are responding locally to what's happening, that there's somebody to answer a phone, to understand a parent locally, and to work with the district locally to solve the problems that might be occurring. And the responsiveness. As we operate, in my mind, as part of the district, we're working closely with the district to make sure we're resolving the issues in a rapid basis and that we don't have any situations that are outstanding for any period of time. Now the exciting piece. What does it really look like when you're doing transportation? Dr. Carpenter and Ms. Ishernio met with Mr. Dupuy and Ms. Lipkind and I, and we started to peel apart the aspects for what really goes on in transportation. And we have a spreadsheet that we go through, but we're going to really pull out the high points of this. The district really does control what the costs are, and we work on the variables with the district. But the elements are a vehicle cost, about $13,000 a year. When you look at the cost for the vehicles you'll be procuring, it's around $266,000 a year for 7 years, after which the cost will go down. The cost components, I'm not going to go through it, but in terms of transparency, we're showing the cost that we're incurring, and we're making sure that the district is not paying more than that, and we're going to review these variables on an ongoing basis. As you'll see, everything that we can think of, we include in this process, and it's worked for the past 22 years going back to Nantucket at this point. Things that need to be done if you, in fact, move in this direction. We're working over the next 2 months to, first, I would say, finalize an MOU. If that's what you decide to do, then start into the routes. Refining the routes, working with the administrators in the district, making sure that we're determining which equipment you need, which buses, how many buses, and when we're going to order them. That is something that's very time critical at the moment. In February, by the beginning of February, we need to be buying the vehicles. The vehicles have to be built. They're customized in some aspect to you, and there's a lot of people that are looking for vehicles for the summer of 2019. Continue to look at the student data and then recruit the personnel to drive the vehicles and support the staff. May and June, getting the equipment set, finalizing the routing to the extent possible, and then starting in the summer, transporting students for the summer programming and training, and making sure the buses are going through the routes that you've established, and then start the year. And it went a lot faster for 29 slides than I would have thought. But what we're looking for is some direction from through the superintendent and through the chair to the school committee. If this is a direction the group would like to move, we need to look towards developing an agreement so that we can order these vehicles. We can't order them without a purchase order. We can't have a purchase order without a commitment to use the vehicles. So we're at a critical juncture where we have to begin to move forward. I wanted to make sure you had the information that we were here to discuss things, but by the end of January, we need to know and have a commitment as to where we're going.
Questions, comments? Jackie.
I always have just random questions. Is there a local mechanic that, if there's a problem with the bus, or do the buses have to go off Cape?
We never have problems with buses.
Okay, fine. Perfect. Great answer.
We have a shop in Dennisport.
Okay.
And we use local shops in Orleans and in Hyannis and in Bourne to work on more major issues with vehicles. And we have lot mechanics that travel and check vehicles on an ongoing basis.
And then my second question is, and this is completely because I just don't know, where do the buses live? Like, where do they stay?
Park.
Different places, they stay different. They reside in different localities. The cheapest place to keep them is realistically on the school grounds, whether it's one school or various schools, because you're not driving the vehicles to a garaging place. Honestly, you're saving on the miles, you're saving on the labor. We have parked them in various places depending on the district, but that's something we work out in coordination with the district.
We would likely house half of the buses at the middle school and half of the buses at the high school, potentially moving them at different times of the year. The lot over here at the high school is used heavily during Mariner season, so you can imagine that they might be over in Chatham. But when we went out to bid, in part hoping to encourage other vendors to apply, including Cape Destinations, because Cape Destinations being a Harwich company, they have a place in the towns to store the buses. We had made a provision that you could look towards one of the schools to store the buses when they're not in use. So So we would have to see, how the logistics ultimately work out, but I anticipate that they would be on, on our lots.
And then ultimately, when the bus isn't there, the bus driver's car is there.
We have a bus to pick up the drivers.
We need an extra bus to transport the drivers from a agreed upon location.
I didn't think parking was an issue until we came in tonight.
Touche.
We got tight spaces.
Nancy?
I just had a couple of questions and then a clarification. So you said about 7 to 8 years ago is when people started using the collaborative more for the busing.
At this point, Mashpee was the first that really became deeper involved.
Do you know why that would have been? Where that transition came in?
Honestly, it was cost consideration and quality, quality cost and control of the outcome. They saved, I believe, $200,000 the first year of their operation.
Oh, okay.
There was some confusion with some school committee members. They were told they'd save $200,000 a year, so they thought they could cut another $200,000 the second year. They didn't realize it was the same $200,000.
Yeah, one-time shot. Okay, and then the clarification, so because the collaborative is Monomoy and Monomoy is collaborative, you don't benefit from this busing relationship at all. It's just something nice
I really enjoy working with the district, but otherwise there's no financial benefit.
It's only because you guys are nice and help us out because we're a part of you.
Well, you own us.
Right, it's a service that you guys provide.
It is a service. It really is a service organization. So anything districts desire, we have to develop a capacity to perform.
Okay, thank you. And then I also had the maintenance question, and like if bus breaks down, so if we need 14 bus routes and we have a bus that breaks down, I honestly don't even know the answer to this question, but if a bus company was running our routes, would they have another bus come and pick up the kids of the broken down bus? What would happen?
I was scared to ask that.
There's the question, do we have enough vehicles?
Well, would we have an extra vehicle, or what would happen? So if we own 14 buses to do our 14 routes, and so all of our buses are out at drop-off in the afternoon and a bus breaks down, what happens to that?
You have required 3 spare buses.
Okay, that's the answer.
So in your bid, you require 3 spare buses. They can be used for athletics. You talk about enjoyment. One thing that stresses me significantly, and Ms. Lipkind is here and it stresses her significantly, is by the end of this year, we could potentially have 200 vehicles.
Wow.
So when you talk about mechanics and capacity to interplay, there are efficiencies that are gained, but there is also a stress element to that. It means that we need to perform more.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So you answered. Wait, I'm not done yet. And then, the bus drivers. I'm pretty sure I was told this, and I don't remember the answer. Would they be our employees, or how does that?
They would be collaborative employees.
So they would. Okay.
And the collaborative is us.
Right. So they're technically our employees. They're just through the collaborative.
They're on our organizational chart. Their check comes from us. Their benefits come from us.
Okay.
They don't hit your balance sheet other than the payments you make.
But bottom line is we pay you to pay them.
Correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned the local, having somebody local dispatch, and you said that not everybody does the same thing. I know there was talk about having somebody in our office, wherever that happens to be, a central office, to be our local dispatch person. What would other places do?
Every place that we do does it a little bit differently. So there's no standard response, but we work closely with the district. They would need somebody internally to be part of the coordination. We have a district that funds a full-time position that's at their beck and call all the time. That's on our staff. That's the most engaged district. The district that is just as efficient but does it differently has a responsibility of somebody in their central office, has an added responsibility of coordinating the dispatch and the activities with the collaborative. It's a different model. It works just as well, but it really is what the district's needs are. So we work very closely with the district and the cost to make sure that it fits what the needs are district by district. I can't say that every district is identical because serving Nantucket is very different than serving Truro, is very different than serving Bourne or Mashpee.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Terry?
Paul, the last couple of years, in-house, working with our vendor, we were looking into software that would help in the routing. Would that direction be part of our responsibility to seek out that software, or are you?
We have that software. Our goal would be to work with the district. Some districts choose to engage in the routing, some choose not to. We prefer to have them engaged, but have them advise us on what they'd like to see so that there's competency on both sides. I would say more often than not, we're the competency, and they want us to make the changes. In one district, they really want to do more of the routing, but I think it would be a hybrid in this case.
Sharon?
So there are we're used to hiring a contractor and having them deal with it, and we kind of help out. So in this case, I'm aware that we sort of buy the buses, which is different. Is that correct? Or you factor the cost of the bus in? Or?
Sure, it's not incorrect. What I would say is you receive the benefit of ownership and potentially the liability, but more likely not. So what you received is the decreased cost over time. The payments are coming from us. The title is to the collaborative. What we've seen in Mashpee, and as I certainly know, Dr. Carpenter can certainly speak to this, is after 7 years, the vehicles are paid off. They're not all ideal shape, but the capital cost of the vehicle goes down significantly. But I would caution to say that the capital cost of the vehicle is not the most significant cost in transportation. And it's not fuel, it's labor. So the labor cost is by far the most significant cost.
So following that, what is the life expectancy of a bus?
On Cape Cod, it can be a little bit of a challenge depending on how close to the salt water they're parked.
Well, being that we're around saltwater.
We're as close as you're going to get.
Yeah.
So
we're on Nantuckets. The Nantucket buses turn white very quickly. I would say average is 10 to 12 years.
Okay.
12 years, we tend to take good care of them. We have a few buses right now that are 14 years old that are just really solid. But much like a car, sometimes you get a car that can run 20 years, and sometimes you get a car you need to get rid of the next year.
Okay.
So we work closely with the mechanics to make sure we don't run lemons.
Thank you.
Jack?
Just one question back to the title. While we're financing, the buses are titled to the collaborative. Once the buses are paid off, they are still titled to the collaborative?
While they're being financed, they're titled to the finance company.
Well, it's titled to the finance company, but you're also listed on there.
Absolutely.
You have a lien and then that, but then after that, where are they titled?
They're still titled to the collaborative, but as we go through, I can go through back to the costing element. The cost of the daily cost of the ownership of the bus goes from, I would say, about $70 to about $18 for the asset, because you're receiving the benefit of that. It's just that the title and the management and the maintenance of the vehicle is not the responsibility of the district. So you can get your hands into it, but the title stays with the collaborative. You own the collaborative, so.
One of those things. Thank you.
Terry?
A follow-up question, Paul, that Sharon alluded to. We were really kind of distant. Once the summer ends, our contract person took care of the buses, the 14 of them, and then they arrived on Labor Day, and off we went. What would be the maintenance? I'm not talking about a new carburetor, but what happens at the end of 1 year that we or someone of the group would take care of the buses in the way of washing and setting them up for what happens there and where?
We have the school committee members gather, and we have
Big watching person.
It's different district by district. Some of them are parked and washed. Most of them receive preventative maintenance, and they're cleaned up to get ready for the next school year. And some vehicles are used. Your drivers tend to like to work. A fraction of them are used for summer programs. And as I had said before, in some of the districts, the town recreation department is contracting with the schools to use them.
Some obviously would be cleaned up. Who would do that besides
our staff?
One.
Yeah.
We
have mechanics, a lot of mechanics.
Good.
We have people, they get pretty dirty. I was amazed the amount of trash that comes out of a school bus that you don't see.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have a question, but it's not exactly pertinent to this, but maybe you could speak to this. periodically we have questions about seatbelts on buses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any just general comment on that?
Yikes.
All right.
That's not loaded at all.
All right.
It's, there's a lot of discussion around it. Some states are moving towards it. Some, your drivers either really like it or really don't like it. Your preponderance of drivers, you got to make sure they're used and you got to make sure they're maintained. So you can't dip your toe in the water. It's really a commitment and a cost that you need to consider. So it's certainly a discussion for NOSSIT, which is the 4 towns in the regional district on the next section of Outer Cape. They have a few vehicles that they have seatbelts on, and they're toying with the idea. But it's a significant discussion, significant change in the operation for the drivers to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Carpenter, based on the next steps, do you have a recommendation or something?
Well, I just want to make sure that the committee gets all of the information that they need. I think generally we don't have a practice of voting at the same meeting that you get the information, but we would need at our next meeting to take a vote, ideally to go with the collaborative or not. I also sent each of the committee members a little email today on transportation, just to kind of help you also understand sort of the other story. I know there's a lot of emotion out there on why aren't we sticking with Cape Destinations, and Cape Destinations done a great job with our bus transportation, but at the end of the day, they simply didn't bid on the job, and we can't, under mass procurement laws, just award a contract to a company that didn't bid on the job. This is, we're lucky that we have a collaborative that has actually gotten involved in transportation, that we have somewhere to turn, because we do need to provide transportation, come September of this year. And the other thing that I also want to sort of dispel a bit of a myth on is, we are carrying within this budget, and we'll be moving on to a conversation about budget, we're carrying a 10% increase for transportation. And Katie and I are quite optimistic that as we work with the collaborative, that we can come in, hopefully, at 10% or even less. And I think some are out there going, hey, it's 10% increase. That's because you're going with the collaborative. It's the cost of those new buses. I want to kind of point out for just information's sake, the last time we went out to bid and Cape Destinations bid on the contract, it was a 13% increase in transportation costs in the FY15 budget, and that was one of those big pills we had to swallow and figure out how to kind of make ends meet that year, because we were seeing this a actually larger transportation increase than we're budgeting for in this year. So, so I think there's a lot of sort of misunderstanding about transportation. Why go with the collaborative versus versus Cape Destinations?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to just ask a question, and this is on page 18 of your slide. I'm curious, and with Mashpee, it looks like 2009, if I'm understanding this, that they entered into a similar agreement. Would I be reading general education transportation?
Yes.
So is it possible that we could, or could you provide a case study? I'm trying to think of the right. I would love to hear from Mashpee. It looks like that was, 9 going into 10 years ago. I'm just kind of curious. Pros and cons, would that be?
I could give you a short story.
Okay.
It was really tough to start because they changed the parameters the first year. The first 3 years, because we were trying to get a square peg in a round hole, took some adaptation. I asked Dr. Carpenter and Ms. Isernio to sit down with the business manager there, who has been there for the past 10 years, and they sat down, because I could tell you lots of stories, but he's going to tell you exactly how it felt. They went through exactly what you're talking about. They went through the highs, the lows, and the pieces in between. Wouldn't say it was perfect the first 4 years, but it was, we came in to provide something that changed the first day. Other than that, I would defer to Dr. Carpenter and Ms. Isernio for what they got as feedback.
And I'd be happy to reach out to Paul Funk, Mashpee's business manager. He's a Harwich resident, and he's been on the building. He was on the building committee for the construction of the high school. And Paul, if he's available, to see if he could come to our next meeting, maybe give a little overview on how it's gone well. But the long and short from the conversation that Katie and I had is he thinks it's been a very positive relationship and good for Mashpee's budget in the end. I would emphasize, if he does come to talk with the committee, we still need to have the vote by the next school committee meeting, or we're potentially without buses for September.
Okay, Terry?
Speaking of that last comment, I don't know if the committee has a hard and fast 2-week review and mull over on our motions. I know usually we do. Just now we've allowed some votes regarding kids going to Canada. I have a sense, and I've reviewed the stuff. It's the only show in town, and we have a timeliness here. And I find, at least being maybe close to the oldest crew here, when I put 2 weeks off, I forget how good the thing sounded. In other words, I'm indirectly saying I would be much preferred to make a motion.
Do I hear a motion?
Vote this in.
So, is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Is it seconded?
I second it.
May I make a quick comment?
You certainly
Part
may.
of kind of a discussion. I kind of look at it as a positive. Your question about Mashpee back to 2009, and hearing that they had a rocky first 4-ish years, and yet they're still there. Mm-hmm. And I think that it looks like it's one of those things that once you start using the collaborative, it's found to be more beneficial than not.
And I can elaborate a little bit on the first 4 years. You went through a significant change, changing start times and schedules. We prepared a 3-tier transportation schedule, and just before the school year began, they decided to go to 2 tiers. You asked about spare buses. Their 3 spare buses became routes, but we had to put it all together in 2 weeks and do it with the same amount of money and the same amount of labor. So in terms of the change, it was a very significant change. That was the square peg. We had a round peg ready for a round hole, but it was really difficult when we turned the corner. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yes, related. I am concerned about our bus drivers that have done a good job for us, and I'm speaking in general. I don't know any specifics, but there's a time that these people can apply for these jobs, and likely.
Our experience is anybody who wants to come over usually comes over. We're a municipal employer, similar to schools and towns, so the benefits are a little bit different. But what we've found is that 90% plus will make the choice. People that like driving school buses like driving school buses. Our desire is not to bring in a for-profit labor pool to change things around. We want to make sure you're getting a quality service with quality people. So we have no desire to change anything that doesn't need to be changed.
Okay, at this time, we'll vote on the motion to accept the collaborative bus program.
Maybe that could be almost a motion up there.
All right.
I corrected my typo while you were talking.
You want to update your motion?
Yeah.
Want to move this? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll borrow Paul's statement here. I move that the Monomoy School Committee direct and authorize the superintendent to develop and execute a memorandum of agreement with the Cape Cod Collaborative for the provision of student transportation services by the end of January 2019.
Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, curriculum. Oh, curriculum update presentation.
seconds and I'll be all set up. All right. Good evening. How is everybody? Good. So Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum. Pleased to give my first official presentation to the school. It's a big moment for me.
Okay.
So this presentation actually sort of spawned from a conversation I had with the superintendent about 6 weeks ago. I was just sort of had set a meeting with him to sort of check in, sort of how are things going, where, oh great, my presentation's disappearing. How are things going for me, sort of, just looking for feedback, how was I doing so far? And so as part of that conversation, he said, it might be a good time, because as I'll get into it, I've been sort of using the first 6 months or so as an opportunity to, as an opportunity to learn. And so just to sort of come and share with the school committee on what it is that I've learned. So that's sort of the gist of this presentation, give you a sense of what I've learned, sort of the process that I've gone through, and then sort of where I see things going forward into the next year plus. I'm not sure why the presentation keeps cutting out. Maybe I should not move. So, like I said, the purpose here is to give you a sense of the journey that I've been on so far. And I really did try to start the year by just trying to take in as much information as I could, starting right in the beginning of the summer. And I started by, I don't know what is going on. Hey, Jim, my presentation just keeps cutting out on me. Just by trying to start with a series of meetings with different groups that I thought could help give me some good information on the state of curriculum, instruction, and assessment in the district. And a victim of my own presentation because it is my guidepost. Can I borrow your paper one? Thanks. You can flip along with me. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I'm going to keep it there as a backup. So I started in the summer by meeting with the principals, met with each of the principals individually, both to get, I had a series of guiding questions that I went through. Those meetings served two purposes. One was to get to know them, for them to get to know me at a relationship building side, but then also an information gathering campaign for myself. I met with some of the instructional leaders throughout each of the buildings. I've since actually met with the entire instructional leader group, but I initially started by meeting with key people at each building, and by key people I meant people that I had had some previous relationship with during my time in Monomoy before, and I felt would give me sort of, give it to me straight. That I felt that they trusted me enough to sort of give me their real take on how they saw things were going, again, around those same a series of guiding questions that I used with each person that I met with. I did a curriculum document review. I did a data review on both at the school and the district level. And then I was able to get out either individually or with Dr. Carpenter or with the principals and actually start to observe sort of what was actually going on inside the classrooms. And so I've sort of, after all that, and I'm going to focus my conversation tonight just on curriculum, because technically, yes, my title does go into instruction and assessment, but I really want to focus on the curriculum part today. And one of my really big takeaways is that an unbelievable amount of work was done in a very short period of time. I happened to be here as like a lot of that started to get going as we were starting to come together as a district before this high school was built and the people physically came together. But a lot of work was done in the curriculum area, and it really, it's not a pretty analogy, but the best analogy, and again, having been in those rooms, is we're really trying to take two separate sets of curriculum and literally just smashing them together. There's so much, every different curriculum area had to get done. And it was just meeting after meeting. We're just trying to put all this stuff together and really trying to produce just something that was joint to begin, and then a lot of work and legwork has been done since then. But what I have noticed is a product of that, a product of sort of the urgency in the fact that, while curriculum is important, there was just so many other things around personnel and other, there's a lot of distractors when you're creating a new district. That there are sort of three big areas that I've seen as sort of coming out the backside of that, where I think we have some good areas for growth. First is the area of consistency. I think there's a why, because so many people were working on projects at different times, and not everything could be supervised all at the same time, and again, people were doing all this work, and it's such an accelerated pace that we have like inconsistency in the types of formats that we're using for our particular documents. There are a lot of underlying tenets, but just simply like in the physical visual formatting and the way that things are designed, and about the completeness on certain things and whether everything is done like in an understanding by design template. Like a lot of things are, and some people use one template and some people use a different template. It just doesn't, if you kind of roll through it, it doesn't all look the same, and as a result, it isn't all. It's just not all completed in the same way. Second thing that I've noticed is around file organization. So again, because of all these groups coming together, and I remember at the time when Monomoy came together, that was when we also introduced Google at the same time. So some people were more familiar with Google than other people. And so you've got some stuff saved on flash drives that people have. You've got some stuff that people printed out because they were afraid it was going to get lost, and it's in a binder somewhere. You get some stuff in Google Docs folders, and then those folders are assigned to, like, you know, if there are 10 people worked on the committee, one person in that particular group said, hey, you know, I'll create a folder and share it with everybody, but it's like with those 12 people or 10 people, so you have to like track down who actually was the original owner of the folder in order to get the document. So there's like a ton of stuff that's out there, but it's like who owns it, where is it? Is it the most updated version? Has somebody then taken that and worked on another committee that updated it? So it's really trying to figure out where all this stuff lives. And then the last part is, again, because there's so much going on at the same time, and so much work was getting done, that there were definitely some places where people left, you know, decisions or work was done, and then sort of that last final decision of, yes, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to move forward with this, and this is the expectation that everybody's going to move forward with this particular curriculum or this particular assessment or whatever it was, didn't always get all the way out. Didn't get to the end where people are, you know, from the principals, you know, in my conversations with the principals about knowing exactly what it is and an easy way for them to find out. I mean, having just left the principalship and knowing what every single content area at every single grade level inside of your building is supposed to be doing at any particular point in time, it's not something you can commit to memory. You need something that you can go to as a resource to help you figure out where, you know, where your staff is supposed to be. And just being able to communicate even to them so that they know, yes, this is the change that happened, and then now this is the expectation that should be moving forward, this is what you should be seeing happening in the classrooms, etc. So there was a lot, excuse me, a lot to communicate, and not everything got all the way to the end, I would say. So in identifying what the areas of growth are, I've established sort of thinking about what are going to be the goals for curriculum moving forward. So first, I want to create a clear, organized, directed, and centralized access to our curriculum. So I'm going to show you a visual in a second, but basically that the curriculum is housed in a place that is independent from any one person. So even, you know, it's not tied to my position, it's not tied to any teacher position, it is curriculum at Monomoy, separate from anybody can come and go, and it will always be there. And that everybody has access to it. Ultimately, my vision is both within district and outside district. So if you're a parent, you want to know what third grade science curriculum is, you can find it. And you can find it pretty easily. And I'm going to do that through Google, which I'll show you in a second. I want to develop a repeatable process for communication. I've started talking a little bit about this, how we can meld this with our PLC process on if we're going to go into a curriculum review cycle because it's not possible to pull, so let's say you take fourth grade, right? So we've got fourth grade in 2 different schools. You've got 8 different people currently teaching fourth grade. Not all 8 of those people can participate in every math review, English review, science, etc. It's not a good use of resources, and 2, it takes them out of the classroom, and their most important job is to be in front of the kids. So a small group has to work on that. However, if a small group of people works on something and it has a series of meetings, they also have no ownership, the rest of the group has no ownership in the process. So what I want to do is have a system where that small group does some legwork, brings it back to the group for feedback, and then takes that feedback back to the small working group, implements the feedback, and then brings back the final product. And we get to that point where we say, this is the change, and now we're moving forward, everybody understands. And that cycles through the course of a year, which is matched up with the work that's getting done. And then I'm actually starting already on goal number 3 right now, is in order to do 1 and 4, we need to know what it is that we have. I've said to multiple different groups that I met, I don't want to ask people to do work they've already done, and I don't want to start us down a path that we're not ready to go down yet. So I need to know exactly what it is that we have and gather all that stuff that's on all those different places. And I've started, excuse me, working with the Ed Council in order to collect all that information. Because then my ultimate goal is to figure out where our gaps are and start to fill those in. So this is a visual of the structure, and I've actually already, working with Jim in 2011, we've created the actual framework inside of our Google system in order to have this, all the folders are already all set up, thank you. So it's a separate curriculum drive, which is completely separate from me. And the ultimate idea is for us to have some of the different components of the curriculum set. So for example, our scope and sequence documents, which look at, from September to June, what are the major units that are supposed to be covered. And to have all this not only stored there, but also all created in Google Docs, or in Google, because it's not actually technically Docs, in Google Products, so that they're all linked to each other. Because my ultimate vision, end game, probably 2 or 3 years from now, is that very top one, which is that the individual teacher receives a single page Google Doc that is linked to everything that he or she needs that we've developed curriculum-wise in order to teach his or her subject. So by example, if I was a US 1 history teacher, I would get a US 1 page that would have a hot link to the most updated scope and sequence, which that would be linked to any units that have been developed, which would be linked to any common assessments that have been developed, and any resources that we've also had would all be hyperlinked off that. And then, so then when we go through curriculum reviews, we make it so that the team that's working on that gets editing privileges in order to update those documents, but the link always goes to the most updated version of whatever it is that we're doing. But everybody has viewing privileges. And everything, so if I'm a classroom teacher, all I have to keep track of is that one document. I have to file that one document in a place where I know where I can find it. And conversely, or additionally, what we then do is when we bring new staff in, this is somewhere where a curriculum is also super helpful, is when you bring a new staff member in, like I'm a 3rd grade teacher, as part of induction, here's the Google Doc that links you to the 3rd grade science curriculum, the 3rd grade English curriculum, all the common assessments you're doing, etc. It's all on that one document, and you're ready to go as soon as you walk in the door. And so that's the ultimate vision, and this was just something I created to help me as I was trying to think of this idea how we actually would organize all the folders nested inside of each other so that we can actually make it all work. So when you click on what you want, it actually goes where you want it to go. Now, the challenge that I sometimes run into when I have a conversation with people about curriculum, because the ultimate goal here is to get to a place where it doesn't matter if you have any one of our 8 3rd grade teachers, or you have any one of our 3 teachers teaching US history, or 3 teachers teaching geometry, that you're leaving with similar learning experiences. It's a guaranteed viable curriculum, not my term, it's well-versed term within the field. But that I could sit here as a curriculum director or principals can guarantee that it doesn't matter which teacher you have, your kids are going to have similar learning experiences. We're not talking like the Stepford Wives where everybody's saying the same thing on the same day at the same time, but that there are similar learning experiences that every kid's going to have, and we're all working towards similar common goals. The challenge and the pushback you tend to get is, what does that do for my autonomy? Because as New Englanders, we're very, 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 very concerned about our individual autonomy. So autonomy doesn't mean that I get to do whatever I want. And that's not what it means in education. So what we have to do is get to a place where we have autonomy within a consistent structure. So I use an analogy which I've begged, borrowed, and stolen from different people of comparing standards curriculum and lesson planning to architecture. So if we think about the standards, which is what comes to us from the state, they're analogous to the building codes. If you want to build a building inside of a town, there are codes within the state. There are codes that say how that building has to be built. There's certain things that are allowed and aren't allowed, and that's the same for everybody. And that's what the standards say for our kids. It's what do our kids have to know and be able to do by the time they leave second grade, third grade, first grade, etc. The curriculum is where the architect comes in. So you can build multiple buildings that look vastly different inside the same building code, that all still meet building code. This school does not look the same as other schools built in the same year within the state of Massachusetts, but they all meet the building code. And that's where the architecture piece comes in, and architects have their own flair, right? You know, some architects use buttresses, and other ones use other architecture terms, which I don't know. Buttress is my one, I used it. But we have to create, what is the Monomoy design? And like a way to sort of think about it would be, like if you're gonna build a development, and you're gonna build, the houses are gonna look fairly similarly. They're all gonna be capes, and they're all gonna have two-car garage, and because that's what we believe in Monomoy is the good design for a house. That's our curriculum. That's what makes us us. Where the teacher comes in is at the lesson planning level. And to carry the analogy one step forward, once you get into that house, you design the inside of that house to match you and your needs. So if you've got somebody in your family that's wheelchair bound, you're gonna have 3-foot doors, things are gonna be at a certain height. It might be different than the way I put my house. Or if anybody's had young children, you decorate your home. If your kids are like under 4, everything has to be like 4 feet off the ground so that they don't break it. But paint colors, whatever, all those things that come into individualizing the feng shui of your house, that's where you as an individual teacher come in, because we do have individual humans teaching our kids. But they have to be nested inside of a common curriculum that has common goals that are all connected to the standards. And another sort of thing that I always talk about is, why do we even need curriculum? Some people don't even, I'm a good teacher, or we're a good school district, why do we need a curriculum at all? And there's a bunch of different research that's been done, but basically, one of my favorite ones quotes that if you were to teach each of the standards to the depth in which the standards say they should be taught, you'd need 410 days a year. So just do the math, it don't work out. So automatically, you can't get to everything that you need to get to, right? And without a curriculum that says, these are the things that we're going to prioritize, this is what we think that's most important to prepare kids for the next year, or prepare kids across subject areas, etc., then teachers are forced to make these decisions on their own. And they start to decide what I'm going to cut, what do I think is most important, how am I going to prioritize. If I become a new teacher within a new content area, I have to build things from scratch. I came up with a quick little analogy based upon English, but if you had 4 students entering the 6th grade, they could have come from 4 different 5th grade teachers that had different priorities. And I'm not going to read each of these examples to you, but you have a student that is very well prepared for narrative writing, a student that's very well prepared for reading comprehension, a student that's very well prepared for paired text connections, another one that has great grammar skills because of what the teacher has prioritized. And those kids all get put into the same 6th grade class because they came from 5 different 5th grade, or 4 different 5th grade classes. And this happens without a good, coherent, taught curriculum starting in kindergarten. So you can imagine sort of the mix of skills you can get as the kids get older and older without a consistent and well-articulated curriculum. And it really has to start with conversations around where it is we want our kids to go, what it is we want them to learn. I know Jay McTighe worked with the district several years ago, and this is a quote from he and his colleague, but it really is about focusing on where it is we intend students to go, and that's where I really want to focus our conversations in curriculum. You'll notice from me, I'm a big analogy guy, because another analogy that I like to use is, if we don't start with the end in mind, we can run into some problems. So if we use a flight, which I actually have to go, they don't say this for pity, but my grandfather passed away a few weeks ago. I have to fly to Florida this weekend. He's 94, he had a good run. But I'm pretty sure when I hop on that plane that it's important for the pilot to know where he or she is going. We can't take off without a destination in mind. And we need to have a pretty good, or I'm really hoping, the pilot has a really clear understanding of what a successful flight is going to look like. And that is when we're talking about building a curriculum, we need to know where is it that we want the kids to know, and what does successful learning of that thing look like. Because if not, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Similar to is, if we want a pilot to make sure they know where they're going when they leave, and we want to have a consistent, because, you know, the other part of this analogy is that you want each pilot to have a consistent expectation for what a successful flight is. Because if not, again, you're going to run into some troubles. And so this is ultimately why we want to continue to move towards a more consolidated and clearly articulated. There's like a lot of great work that's been done, and it's been done in these pockets, and what we don't have yet is this clear, consistent agreement on where it is we're going and what it's going to be like successfully when we get there. And the curriculum has to help us make those decisions, because people are, if left to their own devices, people will make good, well-intended decisions, but they will make them individually. And we will end up with kids who are are not getting the same educational experience inside of our district. And for me, that's just not okay. Questions?
I just have to jump in here, even if you have questions, because I'm so excited to hear this plan. And in another life, I was involved with a lot of curriculum work. And at first, when you started out, I said, oh yeah, here we go. Everybody's on the same page on the same day. But it is anything but. And the plan you have and the realistic expectations and direction that I'm just blown away. And I'm looking forward to the wherever we're going.
And you see the curriculum work being done in the PLCs in part?
Just bringing back the work for general feedback. And I've had some conversation with the superintendent and with Katie. I understand why it had to be done this way, but I'd really like to move away from a model where we're taking people out of classrooms to work on the curriculum. I'd really like to work to more of a stipended-based model, to where we're, you know, getting a team of people for a fixed amount of time doing work, whether it's after school or whether it's during the summer. The summer piece I want to direct a little bit more, because I think part of, again, so much was getting done at the same time that it was impossible to supervise all the different groups. But what I envision for like going into this summer is that if you select, you know, if you want to do curriculum writing work, let's, you know, like for example, there's new history and social studies standards. That's a curriculum area we're going to have to do a lot of work with this spring and into the summer. So if I've got a team of people that want to work on that, it's not going to be sort of the model where, you know, just sort of submit your hours and what you've done at the end. It's going to be, if you want to work on social studies, here are the dates we're going to do the work, here's the location we're going to do it at, I will be there to supervise the work, because I want to move towards, there's just inconsistent understandings about what each of the elements in our curriculum documents should look like. So as I review them, there's just, you know, what is an essential question? What are, you know, what is it? What are the goals and objectives? There's just, you see a lot of variability in what people have put, because there was no way before for all those people to sort of be under the same roof at the same time doing that work. Where I think we're at a place now where I can shift to that and we can be more targeted, and I can help make sure that the people that are developing those documents understand what the larger vision and the sort of what the bucket is that they're, or what the different buckets look like that they're putting their information in.
Thank you.
Terry?
Thanks, Mark. The thought strikes me that I really just get struck, so you must have thought of this. So I'll skip it.
Okay.
3 years ago, 2 years ago, we spent $200,000 to $25,000 on MathWorks or the Singapore model, wouldn't we be wise when you choose a content to roll out what cycle is, which content, which subject is ready for a review using this model?
Yeah.
Let me just finish my thought. If we've seen poor math scores, and one of the tools of improving it was to commit some money in that text, maybe even some staffing coming in to help the teachers prepare how they bring that in. Would that topic, the math, K through 7 or whatever it is, wouldn't that be first on any cycle so that in 2 years from now we could say, we've got a rhythm here with these 8 elementary teachers or 6 based on a brand new tool of text? So that to me, I was struck because I know the scores in Howard, at least for years, has never been what we wanted them in math. And we've made some financial commitment to it. The staff has had some training and a couple of years with the text in front of them. And I know it takes a long time. But what would your feeling be regarding that?
So, interestingly, well, I guess what I would say is that we'll definitely always have more than one thing up in the air at a time. So as far as a curriculum adoption, that process has been done relative to math and math and focus. However, in my conversations with the principals at both the elementary schools, one of the things we're seeing is the pedagogical shift, the teaching shift that's supposed to go with that hasn't 100% been sort of locked in. And so we even have, is it this month or next month? I've lost track of the dates, but we have a trainer coming in to start to work with some of the pocket areas that we've identified. And we have a follow-up meeting, I know that's this month, with that provider to talk about how we might be able to work out a professional development plan that helps move the teaching practice to the next level. Because it's not, the book was one thing, and it came with sort of a, from what I'm able to learn, it came with sort of a professional development package that you buy with the program. And now we need to continue. The thing about professional development is you need to continue it, right? You can't just, it's not just a one-hit wonder and you move on. So we need to figure out, and that we're in conversation. I have a meeting scheduled with both elementary principals to talk about ongoing with the math specifically. So that we have a similar conversation going on with English language arts. There's 2 different resources at the 2 elementary schools. So we have to have that conversation as well, in addition to the history conversation. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, yeah.
Shana?
So, I'm excited and I'm a little bit concerned because this is a new thing. I really like the idea of the consistency that you're talking about, and I like the way you explained that this is not going to be like robotic, where we might as well have, artificial intelligence doing it. But the idea of having the curriculum, and to me, it's never made sense for every teacher to be required to do curriculum, because some people are good at that. Almost nobody's trained in that goes through teacher training. And so we have Math in Focus. That's a program that we looked at and was well researched out. So this idea of first you have people who want to do it, they're getting paid for it, other people will get feedback into that. That makes so much sense to me, rather than having 200 people doing the same things. The part that's not addressed here that you kind of touched on a little bit is how the teacher support will be. The professional development. You've got certain things on documents that are all to a standard, but then after that, what happens to make it happen?
Right, so I specifically just try to keep this conversation one so that we're not here forever just on curriculum, but
that's fine.
Happening at the same time are conversations around instruction as well. We've had some conversations which are in our strategic plan relative to instructional practice and supporting people in growth in those areas. Going back to the literacy conversation I've had a couple different conversations both at the elementary level and the high school level around supports for staff in some areas that we're looking for growth. So that's going on too. as my title says, Director of CIA. I wish it was cooler than it really sounds, but I did just say focus tonight on the curriculum part, but yeah, it's not we are thinking about those things as well.
And anyone else? Yes.
Just a quick affirmation, since I gave Melissa one earlier today. You had really big shoes to fill stepping in here, and I think you've done a fantastic job over the last 6 months. They're not quite as stylish shoes as we were used to, but I do appreciate everything that you've been doing to dive in and get back up to speed with the Monomoy curriculum. And I think you've had been a great addition to the team. So thank you.
Only 6 months. Thank you.
It's not an indictment on the district at all, but knowing where Dr. Blanchard is right now, I'm thinking she might be winning.
Good luck.
Right, thank you. Okay, at this time, I will accept a motion to approve the regional agreement. Okay, next subject.
I move to approve the regional agreement as presented.
I would second that.
Any discussion? Yes.
So, because I voted against that one part of the regional agreement amendment, it was, I think, transfer of assets. And it's confusing to me. I called Mask today and I asked how I could vote for this. There wasn't an attorney available, but from what I gather, I have to vote against it, even though I really support this whole thing, except for that one section. So.
Any more discussion?
Do you remember what section?
Yeah, what section are we?
Okay, I can specifically mention that. It was,
It was
yeah,
the
it
red
was,
line district.
oh yes, it was section 4, page 3. Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, it's not that. Yes, it was transfer of assets.
Yeah, that's section 4.
Section 5, page 4.
Could I?
No. It was, no, it's not that.
Oh, it's not that?
It is section 5, location and ownership of schools, and it's under E, Town of Harwich shall lease, because that was the amendment where it was the back of the former middle school where we were talking about putting the line in and all that. So it's basically just section 5E that is the problem. So I don't know any way to vote for this and omit that. If anyone knows that, that would be great.
Sharon, could I ask you a question? Is
Sure.
that okay if we, because I think you spoke in front of the Board of Selectmen, was it back in December about this?
Yes.
Okay. And my understanding of, I think they talked about within school hours. Was that the same
Right.
conversation?
Right, but because you weren't on this,
Okay,
you
so
missed some of the different things.
Okay, all right.
It went at the discretion of the school, was taken out. The school committee was taken out. And so that amendment that was on that specific thing, I voted against. So it's only that little part. And I did try to get a hold of a lawyer to help me with this, but I wasn't able to.
Nancy?
What, are you talking about the, I don't remember what it was called, the lease agreement that we voted on at our last meeting? MOU, right? MIA. Thank you, it was.
MOUSC.
Yes, it was that section.
Yes, so the municipal agreement, intermunicipal agreement that we voted on is separate from this.
It pertains exactly to that. I don't agree with this part of the regional agreement, just E. under section 5.
Okay.
Everything
Okay.
else is fine.
I don't know how we clear this up to allow Sharon to bring the unanimity to the vote, but I think the correspondence we received from the town manager, and we discussed that at our last meeting, it outlined a way in which during the school year, during the school hours, the school would have total access to the entire field back there.
That's right.
And after discussion, we voted 6-1 that would be okay. And
There were 2 against.
Oh, two against. So this here, we could vote on it and honor Sharon's disagreement with the extension of E, not how it's written here, but the agreement that the rest of us approved, and we move on.
Can we take a vote? Oh,
I moved. Did somebody, you seconded it?
I did.
So we have a motion and a second, so we can move on.
Tina?
No, I think I'm just trying to understand. So are we voting with an amendment? We're not, okay.
We're voting on this document.
Right.
So we, at our last meeting for Christmas, winter holiday, we voted an intermunicipal agreement that clarifies this section.
And that refers to the paragraph in VD?
For Harwich.
Page 4.
Page 4.
Yeah, you've got it. Right, but it says the terms expressed in paragraph VD
Oh,
shall
yes, and then it goes up
yeah.
into.
So the VD refers to the agreement that we passed, the memorandum of agreement that we passed the previous meeting.
Okay.
I'm asking.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
That's
So
the lease.
Sharon, for clarification, Sharon, if I think I understand what you're saying, is that the terms, in Part E, the terms expressed in paragraph VD shall apply equally to this paragraph, speaks to the memorandum that we spoke about and voted on at our last school committee meeting.
That's right.
So if what you're saying is you don't agree with that sentence, which pertains to that memorandum, then,
Intermunicipal agreement.
thank you, the intermission,
I heard it 3 times now.
the agreement, then that's what you're saying. You're saying you can't agree with E.
Yes.
Okay.
The
And Nancy.
clarification, I speak to you, Tina, and I don't have it all, I don't have it with me, but the,
It's in the minutes of the last meeting.
then that's ideal. If Tina did not vote for it, she wasn't a member, so therefore, I think it's moved anyways.
Yeah, I don't
That
think
is a moved proceeding to vote this agreement. And to honor Sharon's vote on it, she could continue with some consistency and just vote no regarding how we settle this detail of 2 weeks ago.
Can I just say one more thing? Nancy, you articulate really well usually the time we need for the regional agreement to pass. Can you just review that briefly? Just how
I don't
much-
know the timeline, although Mr. Metters, I see, I might call on him to know the timeline, to know when we need to be able to get this to the selectmen. So once it starts here, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Once we're here, once we vote on it here, it then has to be taken to both boards of selectmen, and it has to pass at both boards of selectmen, and then we have to request it to be put on the town meeting agenda for a town meeting vote.
And that has to be by February usually?
When would your...
Deadline is for January.
Apparently our January 25th. Mr. Meadows, if you'd like to come up, I'd be happy to defer to you and your dates. Thanks for coming. Not that you're on the spot or anything.
Good evening. For the record, Corey Metters, Chatham Board of Selectmen. We have meetings on Monday. We can get you on the next agenda.
Well, we have to approve it by then.
No, sooner the better. We're going to try to close the warrant by March. So ideally, as soon as possible, by early February would be better. You know, we're going through our budget session right now, so we're going to have some pretty heavy agendas. So, but we would love to get this on the agenda as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
More by March, okay.
So the ultimate deadline would be end of February. So the March warrant or the warrant will close in March. And I don't know if Harwich has a similar timeline, or their timeline might be earlier. Our dutiful secretary says she's almost positive that it's January 25th as the deadline for Harwich.
Yeah.
Which would mean we would have to pass it and get it to the Harwich Board of Selectmen for them to approve, to agree to put on their warrant.
We have a motion, and it has been seconded. So, all in favor of this regional agreement?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion carries.
But could I make for the minutes that statement that maybe you could put just in the minutes, it's only a no vote because of Section 5E. Thank you.
Leah, you can make that for me as well.
Okay, from the frying pan into the fire. The budget discussion.
I'd like to table budget discussions until FY21. As I mentioned our last meeting, there are some challenges that the district faces as we start to head into FY20. Specifically, those are, we have a pre-K grant that is ending, so to maintain that program, we have to absorb that grant into the operating budget. There's an enhanced school health grant for nursing that is ending, that needs to get absorbed into the budget. What's that? Oh. So, the note from the business manager is it may be restored for one more year on the pre-K grant. So suddenly our budget woes are solved. As we mentioned, we're carrying a transportation placeholder for transportation to potentially increase up to 10%, which, as I indicated the last time we had to go engage in new transportation, that 10% is actually less than what we faced last time, and 10% is fairly reasonable compared to what many districts are facing when they go out to bid for transportation. Health insurance, we have a placeholder at 10%. Health insurance tends to be the wild card on where it falls. Health insurance, if it's a 10% increase, that in and of itself is a $474,000 increase in the district's budget. As I've shared in many conversations this year, and as we were talking about strategic planning, we've seen a growing number of English language learners in the school district to maintain compliance with the sort of federal legislation on how we're supposed to support those learners. We're going to have to add ELL staff, so there's another teacher that we'll be needing to add that that isn't in the this current year's budget. And then I had mentioned that we have some out-of-district placements that are new and will be coming online for students that have intensive special needs. And that is a huge budget impact as we look into FY20. There are also some major unknowns that are still lingering out there in terms of state aid, the minimum contribution, where health insurance will actually land, and then we, as you know, have the contracts that are still out there to be negotiated. So here's my too long budget message at this point. Per our regional agreement, by January 15th, the school district's required to post a draft budget for the upcoming school year. And I actually appreciate the comments that Charles made on the front end of the meeting during public session, where he demanded that the school committee direct me to put forth a budget that meets the district's needs, despite what has been dubbed out there as the budget perfect storm. The budget that we intend to post includes strategic improvements. It maintains programs. it tries to achieve some of this despite some budget challenges that we'll get into. I felt that Tim Wood did a great job of summarizing my budget forecast that I provided you at our last school committee meeting in his article that was headlined "The Budget Perfect Storm," published December 19th. Long and short, the district's needs could be almost $1 million beyond the 3.25% budget increase, which is approximately the town of Harwich's usual revenue growth in a year. The challenge becomes how to close a budget shortfall while maintaining quality programs. Over the past few years at Monomoy, we have been able to go into mid-January with both town managers indicating that they can fully fund a level staff budget that we wanted to put forward. And within these budgets, we've had the ability to strategically enhance programs or curricula, be it adding a sports program or a new math program like Math in Focus. This year is going to be different. There does not seem to be majority support from the Harwich Selectmen to see the town stretching beyond a 3.25 in a year when the schools need this support. And I would just I think many of the school committee members were at this past Monday's meeting, and I wasn't getting the vibe in the room, if I was reading the crowd right, that there was a want to stretch beyond that. I could be wrong. I'd like to be wrong, but that wasn't how I was reading the room. So if that's the case, then it means that the schools need to plan for a potential budget shortfall. Again, I appreciate Charles demanding that town meeting have a say in supporting the district's needs. The challenge is that working out the logistics of closing a shortfall as big as we're potentially facing doesn't best happen on the floor of town meeting. And that's where conversations really need to happen between the superintendent, the school committee, the boards of selectmen, the finance committees, and try to figure out how do you fund a disconnect between where the revenue stream currently is and what the school district's needs are. When approximately 70% of a school's budget are personnel costs, it's impossible to close large budget gaps without staff reductions. Over the holiday vacation, I asked each principal to identify how their building could reduce the budget without impacting programs, opportunities for students, or outcomes that we'd ultimately see with our children. Admittedly, I've got two English teachers here at the table with me. Reduction without impact is probably an oxymoron. The administrative team and I debated a number of staffing changes. And in terms of staffing changes, I deliberately say changes because we discussed reductions, we discussed strategic enhancements, and there are many things that we strategically wanted to make sure happen in a budget, while at the same time we're talking about what do we need to cut to potentially move closer to what we see as the realistic wherewithal with our towns. After the administrative team debated these staffing changes, we met a couple days ago with the school committee's finance subcommittee. In the end, as a collective group, Katie and I and the finance subcommittee talked about a number of changes that we could incorporate into the district's budget that will ultimately help the district move closer to that 3.25, which ultimately impacts the town's assessment. So the budget that we would be posting, that you also have in your packets, is one that has a net reduction of Unit A staff teachers of 3.3 FTEs. It has a net reduction of 5.2 support staff, or a total FTE reduction in the district of 8.5. Even with this 8.5 FTE reduction, Monomoy's assessment could be $533,455 above the 3.25 guidance from our towns. And that would be, if, you know, in terms of Harwich's share, that would be $434,620 over 3.25% in Harwich, and $98,834 over a 3.25% in Chatham. The budget increase includes the cost of these significant out-of-district expenditures, plus the other things that I mentioned at the beginning of this. In total, that would be a 4.1% budget increase, which would result in an increase of 4.78 in our assessment. Assessment is the bill that ultimately the towns get, and we can talk later about, what's the difference between a budget and assessment, why one number is slightly different from the other. Ultimately, we will need the boards of Harwich and Chatham to support more funding for the school district to close this budget gap. This is something that ultimately is out of my hands and the school committees, and will require the voices of residents and the decisions of voters. I always say that regional school budgets look better in May than they do in January. The state hasn't released how much Chapter 70 aid is coming to our school district, nor whether the minimum required contribution costs will shift funding partly from one town or the other. Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has not set its insurance rates for the next year, and if the rates come in at a conservative, or come in less than our conservative 10% that we're carrying in the budget, it may allow us to go and restore some of these potential staff reductions. I also want to emphasize that both this year's budget and next year's budget have a placeholder for a fair contractual cost of living increase for employees, and until we reach a resolution with our unions, that number ultimately is a budgetary unknown. I'm confident that the picture will look rosier as more of these uncertainties become known. I'm confident in our ability to provide a great educational program for our students and families with the budget that we're moving forward, but I'm not pleased with having to put forth a budget that includes staff reductions. Neither I nor the Finance Subcommittee think it's realistic that a clarion call will suddenly happen in all boards supporting a level staff budget for Monomoy next year, and we're trying to proactively seek a compromise with the budget that we'll be posting that's included in the packets. That's my rosy forecast.
Is there a blizzard outside too?
Crickets.
Okay, all right, moving along.
Mayor, actually, can I ask a question?
Yes, questions.
I
was pausing, meaning.
Well, I was trying to decide whether or not to speak.
Go ahead.
Probably should be better off not speaking, but. So this is the document that is going out to the towns on Tuesday.
So you guys post it at town halls and the libraries. We'll post it on our website as well.
Okay. And what is the timeline after that for going to the various towns boards? I know it's sooner than later, I just can't remember.
We haven't been formally invited yet to either board, but in the yeah. But I think typically as we at our next school committee meeting and even the one after, I think what tends to happen this time of year is we'll sort of put forth we'll call it a budget presentation that starts to really get into some of the nitty-gritty that's behind the numbers, and would also, as we get into February, get into if, if there continues to be a gulf there between what I see as the town's wherewithal and what the district's needs are, what sort of reductions we'd have to put in place to bridge that, to bridge that gulf. And I think that's where there needs to be a lot of conversations on, sort of how far does the school district move in that direction. As I said, I do not think it remotely educationally responsible for me to put forth a budget that would reduce staffing all the way down to 3.25%. As I said, what the conversation was with the finance subcommittee and with the admin team is, how do we maintain reasonable class sizes? How do we maintain programs? That was the focus of these discussions. But you can't go and say, okay, to get down to a 3.25, we'd be looking at another 10 to 15 staff members. You can't continue to cut, without hitting program. And at the end of the day, I very much agree with Mr. Griska. You want me to be presenting a budget to you that maintains quality in our schools, not that says, it's like it's going to come in too high. So this is what we have to do.
Yes.
So all these years going to these meetings for the school committee and going to budget meetings with finance and selectmen, my perspective is that we sit and we are trying to accomplish something. And we get into the nitty-gritty of what this means for the outcome for our product. What it appears to me is when we go to some of these meetings, other people and other committees are looking at bottom lines and dollars, and if it was the roads we were looking at, they'd care because they'd be driving on the roads and there would be an obvious thing. But our kids are hidden to a large portion of our electoral body and to a large portion of our voters. And that's where I see the problem. I don't know what the answer. I think we need to start looking at the answer. Obviously, parents need to be involved if we need more support with this, and educators, because those people know and care. I don't know the answer how to get people who care about roads or waterways or other things and pay a lot of attention to that, to take a real look and care what happens with our kids.
Gina, this is where your community engagement comes in.
Good answer.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put this. But I hear you, Sharon, and that's true. And not only parents and people who have kids in school, but people who don't have kids in school also need to be aware. Yes.
Just move the furniture.
Katie Isernio, business manager. We had handed out, and if we could send it back again, the budget process timeline on when things are. And when we met with the two finance directors from Howard and Chatham and the town managers, one of the things we talked about in terms of presenting at the Board of Selectmen's meeting is to hold off as long as we could until we started to get some real numbers. The Chapter 70 numbers, the minimum contribution numbers, the health insurance numbers. Those should be coming. They'll all come soon. Last year, I think the minimum contribution numbers were posted on January 24th. So the superintendent and I will be presenting, I believe at the next meeting, another budget with some more numbers and hopefully having some more solid numbers at that time for funding. So, we have a clearer picture of just where we are. But there is a timeline that we can resend to everybody just so you can mark your calendars. I think typically we go the very end of the month to the two towns.
That's what I had in my head.
Maybe just because of the timing, ease into the beginning of February a little bit.
Okay.
And then it's full steam ahead.
But we'll present here before we present there. Got it, Sharon?
But we wanted to, of course, put all of this in front of you tonight because it, by per the regional agreement, it gets distributed publicly on Tuesday.
Another time, I probably should just put my foot in my mouth and stop, but being a part of the finance actually I can merge it into the subcommittee report because finance subcommittee. But we met on Tuesday afternoon for about 3 hours and just trying to digest everything that the administration came back when you guys met last week. And I just personally, I don't like it. I don't want to put this forward as a budget because I don't like it and it just gives me a nasty feeling. And I don't like the fact that we have so many different situations, the perfect storm, happening, and yet we're still being told by the town of Harwich to stay within a 3.25% increase. And there's a couple of extenuating circumstances that I just wish that the Harwich Selectmen and Finance Committees would take a hard look at and say, oh, yeah, wow, you are dealing with that this year. I understand, I see it. And just look through the budget to say that there's certain situations that we can't control. And it's not like we're saying, hey, yeah, let's add a couple more teachers and let's add a couple more languages at the high school. And, we're not doing any of that. We've always been very conservative with doing a level staff budget, and I don't like having a non-level staff budget. I don't like having the reductions in there. And I had another really good thought and I lost it in my rant. But I think that if the towns look at, or specifically the town of Harwich, if they look at their town's budget and they look at what they're doing to maintain their programs in the town and what they're doing to maintain their staff, and I think it would be nice to have parity there, for them to look at what they're doing and to be okay with us doing the same thing. So I'll take my foot out of my mouth now.
And I just want, I want to add, there's, as I heard you read this, the word uncertainty kept popping up in my head, and I think there's so much uncertainty that I wonder how can you really put forth an accurate budget. I thought when Charles spoke, I thought he made a good point. I'm curious if you did pull out the health costs, what would that look like? And just so I think people understand how this is put together, because sometimes people are just looking at a bottom line number. And I think perhaps we need a bit more breaking down for people to understand, but there's just so much uncertainty. So how do you put forth that?
Yes, Terry?
Now, we all have decent thoughts about, and it's almost every year we get to this point. And that shortfall is either X or it's even further than the X. This clear is a message to us. And there are some uncertainties, as Tina said, that without jumping the gun, although we've got reasons because of code to make certain it's presented next week in the libraries, et cetera. But as Katie said, that we've got some, who was it, Rumsfeld said something like, there are some known unknowns. So in the next 2 or 3 weeks, the subcommittee headed up by Scott and Katie would be chatting with the Harwich people in the hopes that some areas of, for example, the significant out-of-district placement that we've been very fortunate in a sense for several years not to have to deal with. Well, we're dealing with it now, and it's a significant amount. And the health insurance. So all of the Chapter 70. So maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be faced with the exact same numbers, or there'll be clarity with a couple of dollars, a couple of $100,000 less. Then, with that being said, we then begin a presentation that at least gives us some clarity. So, publicly, this is where we find ourselves, and it's going to have to tap into full-time staff that none of us want to do to see that subtraction. So, here we are in early to mid-January, and we'll see where we find ourselves in 3 to 5 weeks, in the hopes that some of this direction will head in the right way in a variety of ways. So,
Okay. Anyone else?
The only other comment I'll say, I mean, it's quite possible that everything comes in better than we think. I mean, that is a possibility.
Love your optimism.
Are you the new one on the board?
Yeah, I think some of some of the things are very possible. So health insurance conversation Katie and I were having with the town managers and finance directors. It looks like health insurance may very well break less than 10%. Significantly less than 10%, which might and I would argue that would position the district to not have to make as many cuts or deep cuts. Although one might look at this from another board's perspective and say, oh, well, that means we don't have to go and come up high enough to support you the other way. And so it's I do think I'd actually say that the big challenge this year may not be how's your budget this year to last year in terms of a % increase. I think pulling out and looking at the intensive out-of-district special need costs that are added to this budget relative to other budgets. And I do think that it's a good time to perhaps have town boards and this board start considering about what sort of stabilization or account do we want to potentially create for future budgets when we have intensive special needs breaking on the district. So my understanding is just prior to me coming here, I think in the budget year prior to that, there was a significant out-of-district increase that the towns faced, and there were overrides that happened in, I believe, in Harwich to fund that. But I think you can hopefully mitigate things like that, by planning. And I also have experience over the last couple of years. It seems every time we say, okay, we want to fund a stabilization account, it becomes like sort of the why would the district have have reserves? So I do think it's time to have some some concurrent conversations about how to bolster for future out-of-district challenges, because it's a certainty that will happen again in the future. You just don't know when.
Yes, Jackie?
I just wanted to add, as we're kind of concluding, that I mirror what Ms. Scott had said as well. I didn't feel it was necessary to repeat what she had said, but with the unknown, the Chapter 7, the minimum contribution, the health insurance, all those undetermined numbers, inevitably we probably will not be where we would like to be when all that comes in and is said and done. And sitting through the finance committee meeting the other night, I just wanted to, it's been unfortunate this year. I feel like the school committee has been on the raw end of being the messenger for a lot of things, and coming off of or still in negotiations going into budget season. It looks as though it'll be another rough ride, and I want to commend the superintendent and the admin and everyone who's been really working on this budget so far, because they've had some very difficult decisions in front of them, and despite whether we like the decisions or not, I think that creatively they were intuitive and really trying to go above and beyond, figuring out how we can make this work. And of course this is our last ditch effort if we absolutely have to do something, but there's hope still. And I do want to encourage the public to talk to your selectmen and go out and vote and take that opportunity, because there is only so much as a board that we can do. We all certainly have our opinions about where we want to see the budget go. I think that the school district itself has been extremely fiscally responsible and, you know, not doing anything outrageous. So just if the community could continue to support the selectmen in making the right choices and supporting the district and what the district needs to continue to be successful. I just want to make sure that the folks understand it's important they vote.
Okay. Then I guess this can be considered the Finance Committee's report?
I think we all spoke, so yeah.
Okay. Then are there any other subcommittee reports? Sharon?
Yes. Today at 5 o'clock, the policy subcommittee met here at the high school. Ms. McGuire, Joe, and I were at the meeting. Ms. McGuire handed out a packet with the tables of contents for all the policies. And policy IMG, animals in schools, policy JIE, pregnant students, and policy JH, student absences and excuses, were reviewed and edited, and kind of along the same lines as what Mark was saying about standardizing things. All the policies now are going to be a little bit standardized with the header stating Monomoy Regional School District and the date of adoption and revision at the end. And so Melissa's going to be doing that.
Okay. Any other subcommittee reports? Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I won't feel slighted or anything.
Did I?
Yeah, because we haven't gone. You're done. We're all done with you.
You said to make the meeting short.
You don't really want to talk, do you?
I'll entertain that in a minute.
Just something really quick. I feel like Johnny Carson and Kreskin, envelope please. So each of you and every parent and staff member and every person that was part, every community member that was part of the strategic planning forum that we had earlier in the year will get a mailing, a nice white envelope. In the mailing will be a little note from me sort of talking about our new strategic plan and the pride that we have in our district. There's a little one-pager that they will get that's sort of the strategic plan and a little one-page along with sort of the process on how we got there. And also in the mailing will be one of our all-new die-cut, larger Monomoy Regional Shark stickers for them to share their district pride around the town.
I can't wait for my mail.
So I just wanted to kind of let you know where we are. We have the strategic plans up there posted. It's ready. We're pumping it out there, and this is sort of like the formal launch to go share the plan with the community.
Terry.
Thought strikes me, Scott, that when we do have some firmer figures but still able to go one way or the other, when we do go before the Howard Selectmen to initially review the second draft, as well as the Chatham Board, I would ask for 15 or 20 minutes in advance of that and share with them the strategic plan, so that as a body of 5 town leaders, they have a sort of personalized message and how we arrived at it by 5 minutes, and then 20 minutes of running through some of the key areas of growth that we hope will happen.
Good idea.
Okay.
Yes. I'm going to be bold and ask a newbie question. Considering this was my first meeting, thank you all, this has been wonderful. I wanted just to ask a question, the room was full with, about the contract. What can we say, if anything at all, to put a little bit of ease I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this, because I understand the sensitivity. And at the same time, from a PR perspective, what is it that we can say? Because I know from in my very short 2 days talking to everybody, there is absolutely a good faith effort being put forward. But how do we put that out? How do we communicate that? How?
They won't listen to me, but.
I think it's a delicate thing. We are in a mediation process with the union, and we have a meeting upcoming with them that I go into like I went into the last one. Actually, the last one I was home recovering from surgery, but on speakerphone during it. But I go into it with great optimism that hopefully we'll come to a resolution. I also am at the point, I'll speak for myself, that I do think at some point either the committee or myself needs to kind of communicate out with all of the teachers in the room what is the committee's offer position, because I'm not really sure that has been clearly communicated to all of those that were in the room tonight, because I shared in at the school committee, I think 2 meetings ago, I do think that that most people, if they actually understood what the offer is on the table, they would question what all of the hoopla is about, because I do think that there's a very good faith effort that's come forward from the committee, but ultimately it takes 2 sides to reach an agreement or keep the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. Keep the and the lights went out.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When we have long-winded, we would block them. Yeah.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thanks, Jim.
You can't second that.
Did someone second?
Does that
Oh, I don't know.
Did
No,
I
I didn't
second?
Entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
I moved. My favorite motion.
All right,
Fair.
all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I hope that answered your question.
Well, I guess we're closed now, right? Can I speak anymore? Or the meeting's closed?
Well,
so I
it might
guess I
still
can.
be.
Yeah, I think it was sufficient. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Good night.
Sharon's ready to go home.
Jackie, can I see you before you leave?